McConnell coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario. If you'd like to send us an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And I love getting your emails. So, like I said, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. One of the biggest conspiracies that we have ever talked about on the show, I mean, besides the assassination of JFK, is did we actually land on the moon? And I've got to tell you something, Exonation. I really didn't buy into that until I had the pleasure of meeting Bart Sibrel and watching his video. So many questions were raised, and he brought up so many points that I've got to tell you, Bart, you changed me from a doubter to a believer. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, Rob. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Good seeing you. You've always busy, busy, busy. And I must tell you, when I read the information that you sent about this deathbed confession, we had to get you on the show.
Yeah, I was waiting for yesterday, or was it 2 days ago? September 11th was the pre-assigned day, and after the public 1 year to the day of the publication of the book, to release a video that I've had for a couple of years, and it's the basically deathbed testimony of another deathbed testimony of the main source of my book, Moon Man: The True Story of a Filmmaker on the CIA Hit List, which you can get at Sibrel.com. And basically, as I was editing the book, which I'd been working on for 15 years and spent 2 years editing, it's kind of the backstory of my films about producing the documentaries, exposing the moon landing fraud, kind of the
Right.
trials and tribulations I went through. I was put in touch with someone who was actually there at Cannon Air Force Base in Clovis, New Mexico, on June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. His name was Cyrus Eugene Akers. He was the MP security chief of the entire military base, and he eyewitnessed the faking of the moon landing. Stood beside President Johnson, who flew in from his home in Texas on holiday by helicopter to view the first of 3 days of filming. And he carried this secret with him because he was threatened with death if he ever told anybody.
Hmm.
And literally on his deathbed, he told his son, and his son on his deathbed told me. And I released that video 2 days ago.
Bart, how did you get involved in the lunar conspiracy?
Well, like you, I grew up believing what
Hmm.
I heard.
Right?
I kind of think about Adam and Eve, and, when I read about their deception in the Bible, I kind of take their side. I mean, if you tell a child there's a pink elephant out the door, they're like, oh boy, how about that? And so, people are told by the government and they're on the
Yeah.
moon. Oh, isn't that great? And they have no idea of the corruption in the government because, according to Bobby Kennedy Jr., his uncle was murdered by the CIA, and I think he has access to more information than anybody else. So, after my father had given me this packet of color prints from Apollo 11, at the time I was 4 years old back in 1969, asleep in bed, but he was an officer in the Air Force, and he gave me these pictures. I put them up on the bedroom wall and was mesmerized by them. So for 10 years, I saw these pictures every day from the age of 4 to 14. That's 3,650 times,
Hmm.
believing that the moon missions were real. And then I saw a gentleman by the name of William Casing, who was a contractor for NASA during the Apollo program for 6 years with high security clearance. And he said they didn't go. They could only orbit the Earth. And here we are 50 years later, and they can still only orbit the Earth. And so that kind of planted a seed in my mind. And you go forward another 10 years, and I had become a filmmaker. And one day, um, I'm editing for the program who, had produced that show I saw. He puts me in touch with Bill, and he originally suggested I do a documentary about it. So I took off about 6 months, and I found a lot of photographic anomalies. Now, I was a filmmaker, so my job is to make fake scenes look real.
Hmm.
And so I know that in sunlight, and all you have to do is go outside on a bright sunny day with a friend, stand about 5 feet apart from one another, and you'll see that your shadows always run in the same direction. They're parallel. It's
Right.
impossible for them to intersect in sunlight. And in some pictures from the Apollo missions, shadows from, let's say, an astronaut and a rock 5 feet away are going at a 90-degree convergence, which is impossible in sunlight, which means it's electrical light, which means they're not on the moon. And then I find out that two of the three astronauts rarely gave interviews. The administrator of NASA resigned without explanation before the first mission. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. And I'm like, maybe they really didn't go. And I thought, well, I love puzzles and I kind of have a relentless, never give up personality. I said to myself, if anyone could figure this out, it would be me. And if they didn't go, that could be dangerous. So I turned down the project. And about 5 years go by, I had another client who basically said they'd get one of my scripts to a Hollywood producer if I did a favor for them, which was to read the Bible. And so they gave me a 1 year Bible divided into 365 calendar days. And over the next 5 years, I read the Bible 5 times from cover to cover. I wasn't a Christian by any means. However, it did develop in me a conviction, first of all, that things don't make themselves, right? The body, if you have an autopsy, they're all departmentalized, working together.
Hmm.
And those things don't make themselves. And evolution really says that lower forms of life are making higher forms of life, which is like kindergarten teaching algebra, right? So that doesn't make any sense. And it
Right.
seemed to me there is a judgment, there is right and wrong, there is light and darkness, and there's truth and lies. And I said to myself, Rob, if they didn't go to the moon, that's actually more profound historically than if they'd actually gone. And if that's the case, then the truth needs to be known for the betterment of mankind. And I realized I'm going to die anyway. So I might as well die, risk my life for a just cause. So I changed my mind and I was put in touch with a millionaire who was a board member of an aerospace company who builds rockets for NASA, who knows they didn't go to the moon. He gave me $1 million to produce my films because he thought it was his patriotic duty to expose it. I was still at that point producing these films, at least the first one, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, which you can
Yeah.
see free at Sibrel.com, under the theory it might be true that they faked it. And then 3.5 years into the 7 year project, I pop in a tape. It says, do not show to the public, that I got from NASA. Bill Casing thinks I got it from a whistleblower. And it's fake footage over and over and over and over again of a 1 foot model of the Earth as they're pretending to be halfway to the moon from Earth orbit with the CIA telling them how to do it on another track of audio. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they really didn't go to the moon. So I call up Bill. I'm frantic. They really didn't go. They really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. They really didn't go. And he's like, well, Bart, I told you. I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. And I guess because I really didn't want to live in a world that was that dark.
Yeah.
And I just wept quietly because it's like, this is our world and this is our government. And that's a sad state to be in.
Bart, I was talking to the Exo Nation earlier tonight, telling them that you were going to be on, and how I admire the work that you do. And when I watched, I remember, it must be 10, 15 years ago when you and I first chatted here on the X Zone. When did you release A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon?
That was in 2001.
All right, so that's when we first had you on. And you sent me a copy of that as well as Astronauts Gone Wild. And I remember bringing it into the green room and putting it on the screen, and it was like, you gotta be kidding. And when I saw Buzz Aldrin, take a punch at you, and then the comments that were made by Edgar Mitchell's son, I mean, after Edgar Mitchell gave you a boot. If these guys had nothing to fear, and if they really went there, all they had to do was put their hand on the Bible and swear. That was it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that Astronauts Gone Wild is, which is kind of like the sequel, you could call it, of A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, is I just tracked down astronauts and I plopped a monitor in front of Edgar Mitchell and showed him the fake footage that I uncovered that conclusively proves that we didn't go to the moon. And he turned beet red, started cursing at me, he literally kicked me from
Yeah.
behind. And in the commotion, I left a wireless microphone on him. And in the commotion, my cameraman left the camera recording. So while the camera's in the back seat of the rental car in the guy's driveway with the doors closed, he's in the house with his son with the doors closed. And we're unintentionally recording the audio of the conversation of him and his son in his house, where they're discussing whether or not to call the CIA to have me assassinated. So I didn't discover this until like 3 months later when the film secretary, who was transcribing the films, called
Hmm.
me up, panicked, and says, Bart, you know what they're talking about at the end of the tape when you left the mic on? And I'm like, I don't know. She says, they're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed. I said, yeah, that's funny. She says, no, Bart, they're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed. And I'm like, that's funny. She says, Bart, you're not listening. They're talking about calling the CIA to have you killed.
Yeah.
Now, if they really went to the moon, and I'm some silly person who thinks they didn't, why would the CIA have to be called? I mean, come on. Now, if I'm a journalist with real footage of fake photography proving a real government fraud of the CIA, then yeah, they might have to be contacted. And odd and sad point, the book of Proverbs says that when a curse is issued on a person who doesn't deserve it, like his son was the one who suggested that they call the CIA to have me killed, his son died of cancer a few years later.
Wow. Bart, stand by, my friend. You and I have to take a break. Thanks very much for coming on the show tonight, Bart.
Sure.
And your website is bartsibrel.com, right?
No, just Sibrel.com.
Sibrel.com. All right.
Sibrel.com.
Just like it says at the bottom of the screen.
There you go.
Bart
Okay,
Sibrel is...
from that ad, I know why you have the nudity warning at the beginning.
You're the first person who caught that.
You have to
My
have eyes
goodness.
to see, and here's it here, right?
Yeah. Bart Sibrel's our very special guest. Sibrel.com is the website. Bart, after you completed the editing and you saw what you had there, how did you feel? Like you
I
had the
was,
smoking gun.
yeah, I was scared to death
Really? Huh?
because I had a blind roommate and a toddler son, and I had proof in my house that the moon landings were fake. I freaked out. I'm like, oh my gosh, what have I done? What have I gotten myself into? Because I figured there'd never be any proof in my lifetime, and I was wrong. And I was in a panic. I called up Bill Casey, what do I do? And the phone call was interrupted, and all these strange things started happening. And then one night on a Wednesday night at church, when I was like the second to the last person leaving because I was talking to the elders, what do I do with this tape? And they're like,
Hmm.
you bit off more than you could chew. You need to drive now to CNN and give it to somebody, expose it because that'll protect you.
Right.
And then I drive past this business that had been closed for hours, and there was a van backed into the driveway so that it could pull out when I went by. Now there were about 300 cars leaving church, before me, and the van didn't follow them. So as soon as I pulled out, he pulled out, and I'm like, "Oh, that guy was waiting for me." Hmm. So I immediately pulled over to the side of the road, and I said, "I'm going nowhere until this guy's in front of me." The guy just stops right there in the middle of the road in the middle of the night, and he realizes eventually that, oops, he followed me too close, and so he gives up and passes me. So I follow him. The saying, know your enemy. So
Right.
he gets on the parkway, 2 lanes one way, 2 lanes the other way with the medium, and I get on the parkway. And I pull up alongside the guy. I'm like, I want to look at this guy. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen those documentaries about the great white shark, and they hang a piece of meat over the side of the boat, and the thing jumps up
Oh,
and
yeah,
grabs
sure.
it, and you can see the eye of the shark,
Hmm.
and it's soulless. There's nobody at home. And so if your grandmother falls over, if your child falls over, it doesn't care. They're going to eat them. And that's how this guy looked. I've never seen a look like that in a human being in my entire life. And as soon as I look at him and he looks at me, my car shuts off. All the electrical power, the engine, and everything. Now, an ex-military intelligence person told me that that was a EMP, either
Yeah.
from his car or potentially from a satellite. So I coast to the side of the road. This guy goes down to the off ramp I can see in front of me, loops around to the other side, and and meets up with another car with the roll down window, and they're talking, I guess, about what to do. And that car gets on the ramp, I guess tag team, then gets on my side. I cross over, they loop around, I cross over again, back and forth, and I'm frantically, wait, flagging down cars, and no one will stop except a taxi. And so I end up calling the police and meeting them in a bright lit area, and they're like, "Yeah, you need private security." And so basically, there's a lot in the book Moon Man at Sibrel.com, which is audio that I read myself, Kindle and print. And I go into a lot of things never discussed before publicly, including these CIA espionage adventures of mine. And basically, I'm trying to tell this story in less than an hour. It's kind of difficult.
Sorry,
But I
buddy.
end up going to CNN,
Hmm.
and I'm surrounded by the police. They won't let me enter. I show them my media credentials. I show them this huge broadcast quality videotape, and I tell them exactly what's on it. Because I figure the CIA has cops on the take in every town in America of 100,000 people or more. And they do what they're told because they have carte blanche. They can, go anywhere with a uniform and a cop car. So they don't know why they were told to stop me from going into CNN. So I tell them. And you can see one of the three just, shocked as he figures it out. One of the three is a captain. Now, what a captain is doing on the street, I have no idea. And so I tell the cab driver, save yourself. And I say, am I free to go? Am I free to go? Am I free to go? And they don't answer the question. So I assume I'm free to go. And I, walk a little slowly, then a little faster, and I dart around the corner of the building, run down the alley behind CNN, and within a few seconds, I'm surrounded by an unmarked van, other police cars, and police motorcycle cars. And they immediately handcuff me, immediately take the tape away, and to my, divine providence, a lawyer who wanted to, I guess, have it a CNN Plaza address. His door is in the alley, you know, to afford it, uh, pops out. And had he not been there, I probably wouldn't be talking to you today. And so one of the things that I heard them talking behind me is, "Where's the thing? I thought you had the thing. No, he's got the thing. Oh, here's the thing." So the thing is this kind of hospital-looking bracelet with no markings on it that they put around one of my wrists. And within about a minute, I feel like I'm drugged by LSD. And so this is some sort of contact drug that they put on my wrist where all my veins are. And next thing I know, I'm so, drugged, I'm vomiting. And they put
Wow.
me in the back of a black van and they interrogate me. They have a clipboard with all these questions, and I told them everything they wanted to know. I mean, I don't know why you would ever waterboard anybody. You can either bribe them with billions of dollars, or you can give them truth serum, and it works. I'm so in la la land. I think that the good guy's trying to help me. I tell them everything they want to know. I end up escaping from their custody, making my way back to Nashville, where I pee in a cup. I said, I got him. I'm going to prove that I was drugged by this exotic CIA drug. So I give it to a friend to put in a lab in his name, not mine. I'm trying to outwit the CIA here. And after a few days, he calls me up and says, "Well, there was a problem at the lab." I said, "Oh, what was that?" He said, "Well, they had a break in over the weekend." I said, "Yeah, so what?" He said, "Well, strange thing. The only thing stolen was your urine sample."
You got to be kidding.
So I go into all of this in the book. I go into basically interviews that I uh, did with Gus Grissom's widow for 3 hours and his son for 2 hours. And they tell me they have forensic evidence that the CIA murdered the man who would have been the first man on the moon because he was a whistleblower and wouldn't cooperate. And so this is pretty sad situation because what that means is, our labor, a third of it is going to the federal government. And what are they doing with that? Not only are they faking the moon landing, they're murdering our brethren for exposing their crimes.
So, what was the necessity of the government to hoax the moon landing?
Well, I guess it was pride. They say pride comes before a fall.
Hmm.
And that's kind of how my film opens up. It opens up with the Tower of Babel, which, according to the Bible, was built for pride, to
Yeah.
boast that we're a greater nation than you are because our building is taller. Never finished. And then we show the greatest biggest machine ever built, known as the Titanic, and they put in print a ship that God himself cannot sink. Never finished. Then we show Tricky Dick Nixon, who knew they were not on the moon, who didn't even show up for the launch because he was so afraid of getting caught. Imagine, they're going to the moon for the first time and you're president, and you don't show up until the second launch after they got away with it, right? And he said, when he knew they weren't there, putting a man on the moon is the greatest event since creation itself. Not to mention, they embezzled $200 billion in today's dollars for going into Earth orbit, which would be a fraction of that to do. And who knows what other reasons. I think they were probably surprised that they got away with it so easily. And, whoever shot JFK is still dead, and whoever did 9/11, 3,000 people are still dead. The moon landing is unique fraud because it's a positive lie. They gave the candy that the public wanted to wave their flag at, and tear up at, and give parades to and congressional medals of honor the liars. And even though the Kennedy assassination witness list, they say, is as much as 200 people they knocked off, and of course 9/11 killed 3,000 in the Gulf of Tonkin, which Robert McNamara confessed before he died, they just made that up. Even though the moon landing fraud killed fewer people, it's the one fraud of the government that, if exposed, I think would outrage the public more to initiate change in the government, because it's burned in their hearts how, that they did it, and they cried and they prayed and they cheered. And if they find out their government lied to them about that, I think they'll be very angry. That's why I think when George Orwell said, whoever controls the past, the moon landing's real,
Right.
controls the future, which is the federal government. And that means that until the moon landing fraud is exposed, our federal government will be corrupt until the end of time.
Stand by. We got to take a break. Exonation. Bart Sibrel is our special guest. Sibrel.com is his website. Bart Sibrel's our guest. Sibrel.com. Bart, what do you think about NASA going back to the moon? I mean, that's if they ever get the rocket to work.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? 50 years ago, when they had 1/1,000th the computing power of a cell phone, they went from never being in space to walking on the moon in 8 years. Now, with 50 years better technology, it takes 18 years to develop the Artemis rocket, which didn't launch the first time or the second time or the third time. And it's only going to orbit the moon and not land, and with no one on board. So how can they go from never being in space to walking on the moon in 8 years with 1/1,000th the computing power of a cell phone, when 50 years later it takes 18 years just to orbit the moon unmanned? You see that? So what that means is, for the first time in history, technology was greater in the past than in the future. So seeing how that's impossible, unfortunately, it means the moon landings were a forgery.
So basically, as far as I see it, they're shooting themselves in the foot.
Well, it's inevitable, because as time goes by, the moon landing fraud becomes more and more and more apparent. And then all those people who had it burned in their consciousness that it was real, they're dying off, and objective people are looking at it, and the truth is being exposed.
Bart, let me ask you this. It's a little bit off the moon hoax, but what is your opinion on the UFO situation? Do you believe that UFOs are real, or um, is this another event that the government is using in order to have the people look away from the left hand to the right hand while the left hand is doing something nefarious?
Yes, I think that's what it is. You have to remember that Edgar Mitchell spent his entire life saying he walked on the moon when he did not. And he spent his entire life saying UFOs are as real as the moon landing. You see? Now, UFOs, unidentified flying objects, do exist. And if you go to Cibrel.com and just scroll down a little bit, you'll see an article entitled, "Are There Really Aliens?" And I spent hundreds of hours researching this and writing it, and it's got multiple links in it to back everything up. Basically, the top two UFO researchers, I forget their names, one American, one French, after 4 decades of research, came to the same conclusion independent of one another. Number one, UFOs are real. And number two, they're not from outer space. And
Right.
number three, they think they're demonic. I mean, when people are being abducted by UFOs, they invoke the name of Jesus and they run away. So if they're from outer space, why would the name Rob, Bart, Jesus, or Buddha mind? Why would that matter to them? You
Hmm.
see? So there's something going on here. And the last time I was in a hotel and they were free, I think 10 free HBO movies, three of them, a third of them, were about aliens from outer space. Now, if a third of them were about how great the president is, or a third of them were about how terrible the president is, I would think there's a propaganda campaign going on. So they want us to believe in them really bad. So that means they're not true.
The longer I've been doing the show now for 33 years, and Bart, there has not been one single ounce of physical evidence ever supplied or brought forward to anyone that substantiates any claims of people who have been abducted by aliens or who have had a real encounter, whether like Travis Walton. Caught him lying so many times. He's got as many lies in his fridge as Billy Meyer has in a piece of cheese. Nobody makes any more sense. They all want to keep the lie going because it's a cash cow for them. So why do they keep doing it when they know the public is caught on? And why would the U.S. government continue its charade that they went to the moon when, thanks to you, we know it's all false?
Well, I played poker once with a guy who was so much better than me. And he did something like a triple bluff on me. He like bluffed in a way that I was know he was bluffing, but he knew I would think that, and he went the other way. And so when they have this disclosure from these sources in the military, they're throwing a bone to salivating UFO people
Mm-hmm.
who want to believe everything they are given, and
Yeah.
the government knows that. So if they had a secret, they would never leak it. Period. I mean, who has leaked that we didn't go to the moon? Who's still alive? Zero. And it involved at least 50 people, and that secret they have kept. So if UFOs are traveling from halfway across the universe,
Right.
hundreds of millions of light years away, then they would have the technology to be optically invisible. So if they're being seen, it's because they want to be seen. You see that? And so they want us to believe in this. Why, I don't know. It probably has something to do with end times deception. They want us to believe in them for some strange reason of some future deception. I'm not sure what it is. However, I would be very suspicious about it.
Tell me more about the demonic connection.
Well, there was a girl in high school about 10 years ago. She did a genealogical study of every president of the United States at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and all but one of them were from the same bloodline.
Hmm.
And it was traced back to somewhere in England about the 1300s, which is kind of odd, isn't it? And if you believe the Bible is a history book, which it is, and a truthful history
Yeah.
book, then it says in Genesis 3:15 that there will be war between the seed of Adam, which is mankind, and the seed of the devil, which means the future offspring. The seed in the Bible means future offspring. So there's going to be, you could say, two races on earth. There's going to be the race that God made, and some sort of hybrid deformed race that Lucifer is participating in. Now, Genesis 6 says that the sons of God came down, intermarried with the daughters of men, and because of that, a race of giants, deformed people were born.
The Nephilim.
That's right.
Yeah.
And all the world leaders at that time were Nephilim, and I think they pass on that lineage to the world leaders today. Now, that was believed to be true until about the 1800s. So that interpretation of the Bible was considered true for, close to 6,000 years. And just recently said, no. It means, the children of Cain or something like that. Well, The oldest book in the Bible is actually Job, and they're the ones who use the Hebrew word for sons of men. I'm sorry, sons of God first, and it means angels. The sons of God appeared before the throne of God along with Satan, and so it means angels. And so, why would it not mean angels if in the later book, Genesis? So I think that's what it means. And when you mate a normal height person with a normal height person, you get a normal height baby person,
Right.
right? And if you made a giant with a normal height person, you could get a giant. And they say in the Bible they also had 6 fingers and 6 toes on each extremity, and which is kind of unusual. And the American Indians said that there were a race of giants also who had 6 fingers and 6 toes. And that's why they would say, hello, how, holding up their hand. See, I'm safe. I'm not one of them.
Ah.
See? And with, of course, genetic manipulation, if these fallen angels have been around for thousands of years, then they could, gene splice out the six
Hmm.
finger, the 6 toe, the height. And then they could also make aircraft that could go under the water and fly in the sky. You see that? And have zero gravity propulsion. But they're not from outer space, just like the top 2 UFO researchers said.
I'm sure you've delved into the Roswell crash, and I was talking earlier to the explanation about that, and there are so many holes in the Roswell crash, and yet so many people still look at that as being the mecca of ufology in the United States. My biggest concern is with Jesse Marcel, the base intelligence officer. What's he do? He goes out to the Brazel farm, takes all this debris, and instead of going back to the base and maintaining the chain of custody, what does he do? Well, I'm going to bring it home, let Junior play with it for a while before I take it back to the base. To
Well, I don't
me,
know. Yeah, go ahead.
that shoots down any credibility that Marcel had, or any credibility as to what the actual events were.
Well, I mean, if it happened, it could be a craft of the fallen angels,
Mm-hmm.
and these, green little 4 foot tall gray men could be clone bees that they made, right?
Right.
Who they breed to be their workers. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be misinformation. I don't know. The thing about it is, show me one little green man and I'll believe. I mean, I've got an eyewitness who was there at Cannon Air Force Base when they faked it. Shadows intersecting at 90 degrees,
Yeah.
classified footage, and the logic technology can't be better in the past and in the future. So again, the government wants us to believe it. Edgar Mitchell keeps saying UFOs are as real as the moon landing. So that means they're equally fake.
I think it's going to be very interesting to find out why NASA is going back to the moon. They're saying it's because the moon has a large proportionate amount of helium 3. And that helium 3 is very easy to bring back to Earth. How they're going to do that, God only knows. But what about China? What about India? What about the other countries who now have the capability of going to the moon? Would they not want to go and verify or authenticate that the Americas really were on the moon?
Well, I know a high ranking member of the Chinese space program, and he told me
Hmm.
that they know for certain that the moon landings were fake. They teach it
Wow.
in their universities that they're fake, and they have an agreement with the United States government not to expose it, but also not to say that it's real because of their integrity. And in exchange for basically space technology that NASA is giving to China. I know that from someone who's receiving it, right? So there you go. And it's like if I had a photograph of a world leader with a prostitute, I could give it away for free, right? And ruin them. Or the smarter thing might be to blackmail them year after year after year. And that's what these smart countries are doing. Yes, China knows, and the European Space Agency knows, and Japan knows, and Israel knows, and they're all in on it. I mean, look what happens when you don't do what the United States government says. Ask Gaddafi, ask Saddam Hussein, right? Ask Noriega what happens when they stop cooperating with the United States government.
Okay, so if the government was to come out and say, hey, listen, 50 years or so ago, we lied to you. We never went to the moon. We owe the American public an apology. Would that not free the American government from their blackmailers?
It would, and that's one good reason to expose it. The problem that they have is this: if they faked the moon landing and never killed anybody in the process, then whoop-de-doo, it's a fake Picasso, a fake $100 bill.
Right.
Unfortunately, we have evidence and testimony of dead astronauts' relatives that they murdered astronauts who would not participate in the fraud. And so it's not only would the truth, if the truth came out, then very next thing there'd be an investigation into the Apollo 1 fire. And it would prove that not only is the government deceptive, they murder people who try to expose it. And we finance that because the CIA, we pay their salaries, and the hardware that they use to kill people with, we pay for that too.
But
And
I thought the CIA had no jurisdiction in the continental United States.
yeah, well, they boast openly in publications that they assassinate democratically elected leaders of other countries that they don't like. I mean, William Benny goes on national TV and says openly, yeah, I was there for 30 years. We spy on the private cell phone conversations of Supreme Court justices in order to get financial and sexual impropriety on them so that we can blackmail them to vote the way that we tell them. No one contradicts this. It's an established fact, even makes the mainstream media once or twice. Not a single congressional investigation. You know why? Because the departments that should be investigating that are just as corrupt. I mean, you had Bernie Sanders repeatedly getting more votes than Hillary Clinton, and yet Hillary Clinton gets more delegates. And when a guy exposes that corruption, instead of going after that corruption, they go after the guy who exposed the corruption. That's
Yeah.
what the FBI did. I mean, how this can go on openly, it boggles my mind.
Bart, stand by. Final break. Exonation. Bart Sibrel's our special guest. Go to his website. Buy his book. Buy his DVDs. This guy is above board. Sibrel.com. We'll be back as we wrap up this edition and this night here in the XR. Don't go away. Bart Sibrel's our guest. Sibrel.com. Bart, based on the evidence that you've been able to uncover over the years, looking at the Mars missions, are they real or are these also staged events?
Well, they did fake the moon landing, so they certainly can't be trusted at all, can they?
Yeah, I agree with
And
you.
I remember seeing footage of a telescope in Hawaii, and some guy commented, "Oh yeah, these volcanic rocks on this hill look just like the Mars pictures." Oops. And then, of course, I'm sure you've seen the pictures in northern Greenland that they pop out and paste right over the Mars pictures, and they line up perfectly. You
Yeah.
know, the angles, the mountains, and all that stuff. For all we know, they faked the pyramids, the face, and all that on Mars too to get people to believe in UFOs. You see, NASA cannot be trusted. Now they may launch a probe to Jupiter, and it may take a few pictures of Jupiter, but what it's really doing after that could be a secret. It could be tracking an asteroid or a comet or a rogue planet that we don't know about. So, unfortunately, NASA can in no way be trusted until they admit that the moon landings were fraudulent.
Are you still under threat?
Well, my source, who video I just uploaded 2 days ago, just go to Cibrel.com, click on Moonman video links, and it'll be the last link there. When I was confirming the information with his father, with him, while I was editing the book, a few days later, his house was broken into with somebody who somehow knew the password. And all of the information about his father, which was on his computer, was stolen. And then a few days later, he was met with two literal men in black who came to his house and told him that he might be killed if he ever spoke to me again. This
Wow.
was less than 2 years ago. And so I called the FBI and the White House and a senator on the Intelligence Committee to get him whistleblower protection. And I guess they backed off. These people have to be careful because, let me say this, I basically did something intentionally to help that event happen so that the people who threatened him could be followed by good guys in the government. Hmm. So they better watch their back.
Are there good guys in the government?
Absolutely. I go into this in the chapter in the book called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to CNN and A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Church, where I met, after I discovered this secret footage, two guys, as best as I could tell, were from, I guess it's called the MCIA, which is the Marine Corps Intelligence Activity Department. And they,
Mhm.
let me know I was, protected. My back was being watched by them. They gave me encouragement, and I, never saw them again. I can basically interpret that to mean that there are good guys in the government, maybe factions in the government fighting one another with a mutual agreement just to, keep it under the radar. I mean, somebody from some satellite, I presume, set a direct energy weapon to those buildings on 9/11. And so that was some department in our government. So those are rogue agents in our government. Now, that must mean there are good agents in our government who know about that. And there are good agents in our government who know that I was, followed and threatened and drugged, who literally rescued me, from that experience, and who protected my source from my book after his life was threatened less than 2 years ago.
So, am I to understand that you believe that it was an energy weapon that brought down the towers?
It seems to be. I remember seeing some footage of a spherical object. It looked like a metal sphere, as best as I could tell, the size of a car, that went through the building, apparently on top of a video of a plane doing it, so that something could go in and out of the building. And that way they could mimic the airplane hitting it. And that, as engineers have said multiple times, 3,000 of them have said that it's impossible for a pinhole airplane to bring down a skyscraper. It's a grid. It'd be like throwing a pencil through a screen
Hmm.
door. Maybe it was explosives, doom, 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 or direct energy weapon. I don't know. That's just a guess on my part. But whoever did it, it was done by government employees and in some department, and therefore there are people around them who know what's going on, who are probably spying on them and recording everything, including who visited my source's house and threatened him. So, you know, if I were president, I would pardon everybody. I would pardon whoever shot JFK, whoever faked the moon landing, and all that stuff, if they told the truth publicly. I would pardon any whistleblower who came forward and confessed of any ongoing crime in the government, including murder. I would pardon them of, because the truth is more important. They're going to have to face God and death anyway.
Hmm.
So we need to have a house cleaning, and I think it was President Truman who started the CIA, who said it was the biggest regret of his entire presidency that they won't allow a house cleaning. And when that can't be done in a democracy, we're no longer a democracy. And that's another fake thing they're faking, is that we're a
Democracy?
democracy. We're not. If we're a democracy, they wouldn't close churches because of a pandemic. If we're a democracy, then Congress and the Senate would have voted whether or not to fake the moon landing, right?
Hmm.
And if they're of the same bloodline or same club on both sides of the party. I mean, after all, Johnson was there when they filmed the faking of it, and Nixon gave it the thumbs up, and one was Republican, one was Democrat. But that doesn't matter, does it?
I've got about 2 minutes left. First of all, I want to thank you ever so much, Bart. I'm a big fan of yours. Keep the great work up. People need to know more about you, so we're going to do everything we can to get your message out there. Uh, Quickly, your comments on COVID.
Well, I might be uploading this to my YouTube channel if you share it with me. Uh, all I can say is let me say this: there was a prophet by the name of John Paul Jackson who died in 2015 out of vision that God gave him. He said there would be two pandemics, and this is before this one happened. He said the first would basically, not amount to much or
Hmm.
false flag or whatever, and the second one would be very dangerous. And so all I can say is there's plenty of things out there. I mean, if they can fake the moon landing, if they can kill Kennedy in front of people, if they can get away with 9/11, they can do anything.
Bart, thank you so much for joining us. If there's anything we can do to help you, just let me know. And love to have you back on again.
Well, thank you, Rob.
You take care of yourself, Bart. And X Zone Nation, if you'd like to find out more about Bart, there's his website right underneath at Sibrel.com. Well, that's it for tonight, everyone. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X Zone. It's a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. It's a place where fact is fiction, and fiction, well, 9 times out of 10, is much more interesting than reality. Did I say that right? I don't think so. Fiction. I gotta think about that. See what happens when I talk to Bart. I even doubt what we do here. Are we part of a conspiracy? No. So let's try this again. It's a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. There you go. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock. So whatever you do, don't go away and enjoy your evening. Good night, everyone.